Good afternoon, everyone. Squim, the internet, everyone else out there. You know, it isn't unusual at this time of the year, prior to the Passover, for a lot of us to experience certain pressures, certain stresses, things that seem to happen at this time of the year. It's not only during and before, I should say, the Passover, but this also often occurs in the fall before the fall holy days. Well, in the last several weeks, I've had 3 totally unrelated, isolated things happen to me, which came out of the blue. I wasn't expecting any of them. I couldn't have really prepared for them, but they all together acted as a catalyst, leading me to be a little less polite than I should have been on a phone call I had with an assistant working in a doctor's office a few weeks ago. I called and I apologized to her later because, in a way, she was caught in the middle of something over which she had absolutely no control. There was nothing that she could have done one way or the other. And I felt bad for having talked to her the way I did as a result of that conversation. Well, like I said, the other 3 things in and of themselves didn't have anything to do, had no bearing on this particular incident. But it just happened that they happened up to and around the time leading up to that conversation, that phone conversation, and because of that, I reacted in the way I did. There's no need for me to describe them or to go into them, other than to say, in a general way, 2 of them were corrective in nature, and one was my frustration that occurred because I wasn't able to deliver something that I'd promised someone. And it was very frustrating. You know, now in the large scheme of things, all of these are simply irrelevant. If I were to go through them and describe them in detail, you'd walk out of here this afternoon and you'd promptly forget about them. And that's just how insignificant they were. However, how I reacted to them was another story. Now, none of us enjoy being corrected. You know, it's usually very painful, if not emotionally, maybe physically, and sometimes both emotionally and physically as well. Turn to Hebrews 12, verse 6. Hebrews 12, verse 6. For whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth and scourgeth. If you look that word scourgeth up in Strong's, it's number 3146. It's the same word that's used in John 19, verse 1, where we're told Pilate took Jesus and scourged him. So going back to this, for whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth and scourgeth every son and daughter whom he receiveth. Verse 7, if you endure chastening, God deals with you as with sons. For what son is he whom the Father chasteneth not? And any of you that have been parents know that that's just the way parents react unless they've got a streak of sadism or something like that. They don't enjoy discipline or spanking their children necessarily, but they don't want them to commit a mistake that, if it's uncorrected at whatever stage in life they're at that particular time, will come back and bite them later on, somewhere down the line. Somewhere in life they will be affected by not having been corrected. And that's exactly what we're told here. I want you to keep your thumb here. I'm going to go to another verse a little later on in Hebrews. But when God looks at us as we walk down this road, every once in a while, if you're on a ship, for example, the captain or the navigator, the combination, they're always making course corrections. Ship may go a little off to the right or a little off to the left, and they have to be brought into line, and that's what our lives represent as well. We have to have those course corrections in our lives. And sometimes the only way that happens or will happen is if we're corrected. It could be physically, it could be emotionally. Well, how well do we take correction? How well do you take correction? How well do I take correction? Do we cringe and say, if we're trying to find an excuse for our action, it didn't happen that way. That wasn't the way it went down. And wait until you hear my side of the story. You know, our human nature, our human instinct is to try to rationalize or make excuses for our actions. But is that the right approach? And more importantly, is that the way that Jesus wants us to respond? You know, I think we all know the answer to that. When you're in the service, be it Navy, Army, Marines, Coast Guard, Air Force, whatever, one of the first things you're taught is to be very responsive, very polite, and very quick to answer yes, sir, or no, sir, and to snap it out like that. If you say, yes, sir, to a request, yes, sir, and you have kind of a grimace on your face, that's not going to cut it. They want a snappy yes, sir, or no, sir, as the case may be, but they want that kind of response. Well, we're going to be corrected. You know, we currently may be in the process of experiencing some kind of a correction now in our lives. Turn to verse 11 in Hebrews 12. Hebrews 12, verse 11. Now, no chastening for the present seems to be joyous, but grievous. That's the way correction affects us. Nevertheless, afterward, after it's happened, after we've been corrected, after we've had a chance to think about what we did and the consequences, after all of that has affected our lives, it yieldeth the peaceable fruit of righteousness unto them which are exercised thereby. So God is not up there with a big club swinging around capriciously whenever he feels like it. When you need correction, you're going to get it, and it may come from different sources. It may come from your boss. It may come from your spouse. It may come from your children. It may come from your next-door neighbor. It may come from the minister. Wherever it comes from, you will be corrected. we need to think about how we have been corrected this past year, this past month, this past week, and maybe even in some cases today. And then thank our Father for loving us so much, for caring for us so much, for being so concerned with our welfare and where we're going in our lives, that He's taken the time to correct us if we've needed that, and or to chastise us. Because after we have done this, there are fruits that are evident in our life because of what happened. This coming Thursday night is the Passover. When we take the Passover, just make a point to thank God for the correction that He's given you and where and how He's brought you to this place in your life as you take the Passover. And let us eat of that bread joyfully, and with thanksgiving drink of that cup, because we know and understand it is through these course corrections in our lives that we will someday stand before Him in His kingdom.